Today I am going to be talking about using a calculator. Alright, so specifically I am going to be talking about using a class whiz calculator. Now if you don't know what a class whiz calculator is, then this is the calculator that the exam boards recommend for both GCSE and A-level. It is accepted in both exam papers, and it will be the only calculator that you will need for the next however many years you're doing GCSE and A-level maths. Alright, so it's a Class EO calculator FX991EX Class Whiz. Alright, there is a link at the bottom of the page. Alright, so you're going to go have a look and see how much it kind of costs. But like I said, it's the only one that I will recommend, and it's the only one that certainly for an A-level perspective that you will need. So whether or not you're doing GCSE or A-level, this one will see you all the way through, and that's quite important. You don't want to end up buying one calculator which is maybe cheaper and then further down the line having to buy something else. And this one has an awful lot of functions which will benefit you at GCSE and certainly at A-level. Alright, so it's worth the investment from my opinion. Alright, so we're just going to go through a couple of functions in terms of how to kind of go through some of these kind of this concept and what the buttons do. Some of you already know, hopefully, but others you might not, and hopefully I can just give you a little bit of piece of information, but I'm going to make sure you know as much as you can, and obviously that make an informed decision as you think whether or not it's worth it. Alright, so first things first, any calculator, this little button at the top should say D. What that means is it is in degrees. Alright, if it says anything different, you need to get it changed. Alright, I'm going to quickly show you how to do that one. So you've got a menu setup button, but to change this I need to press the shift and the menu button, and you'll see something said the angle unit. Now that angle unit there is essentially, there are 3 different angle units. Now for GCSE you only need degrees, so if I click on the 2, you'll see your degrees, radians and gradients. Now if I was to now press 2, it would switch to radians, but of course I want to keep it in degrees. Alright, I will press 2 so you can see it changed, but of course I want it back in degrees. Alright, so it needs to be in degrees for GCSE. If you do not change it to degrees, then when you do anything involving sine, cos and tan, so all trigonometry, cosine rule, sine rule, you're going to get it wrong. Alright, and of course you don't want that, so that's quite important kind of factor. Alright, and hopefully your examiners and certainly your teachers will make sure that that is right before you walk into exam. Alright, so that's the kind of first thing. The other thing I'm going to talk to you about is just the fractions. So if I did 8 divided by 3, and it gave me here an improper fraction. Now that's just how my calculator is set up. Now you might want it as a mixed number, you might want it as a decimal. Alright, some of you already know the SD button kind of changes it into a decimal, but then you've also got this little bit at the top, you can see here just above it. So if I press the shift and that button, you'll see it turns into an improper fraction. Alright, now from a simplification point of view, the GCSE, if they ask you to leave it in a simplified form, a mixed number is the way they would like it eventually at the end. Alright, so just something to be mindful of in terms of those different kind of ways of getting that particular solution. Alright, so that's what those kind of different things kind of do. Alright, the other one, well there's quite a few of these I'm going to go through, is certainly when I can just click on this menu button, you'll see a variety of different options. Now we're in the calculate mode, and that's quite good, that's where we kind of want to be, but I just wanted to show you some of the rest. Alright, so if I use the arrows button here and I scroll along, I've got complex numbers. Now that is A-level. Alright, so anything involved in the square root of -1, alright, called I is there. If you are doing a further maths GCSE potentially, then you might come across different bases. You'll certainly come across matrices if you're doing the IGCSE or a further maths GCSE, and again that will come up in A-level further maths, I believe, rather than just A-level maths. Then we've got vectors, certainly comes up at A-level. Not really kind of needed for GCSE. There are vectors at GCSE, but that's a little more in depth, but you might want to have a look and have a play. You've got a bunch of statistics, and then we've got a spreadsheet, which I'll show you it shortly, and then we've got ratio, which you might find useful, and then we'll talk to you about inequalities, equations, and the other table as well. Alright, so there's quite a variety of different kind of functions on here, and what you want to do when you get this calculator is just play. You know, I will go through this for another 10 minutes or so, just talking about various different options, but then you've got to go away and practice. Alright, and as I go through this kind of this content with this calculator, there'll be links appearing at the top right hand side of the page with the lesson that this is most useful for. Alright, so I've already talked about reciprocals, so you'll have seen that kind of pop up hopefully. But as I go through the rest, you'll see the rest kind of appearing. Right, we're going to look at the table. Right, so back to this. So we're going to look at the table. Alright, so go down to table number 9. Alright, you're going to find this useful. You're going to find this useful for anything that's a linear graph or a quadratic graph that you would need to plot. Alright, because what it's going to do, and you'll see in a bunch of these kind of questions, and again you'll see the link at the top, about you'll get a table, some values going in, maybe an equation, and then you're asked to kind of plot it essentially. Alright, so I'm going to show you roughly how to do it. So this means a function of, so let's call that the bit that basically is y, so y equals, and then I'm going to put the equation that's given. So let's just say that it's x squared. So how we put letters in is, you can see these little red letters, it's alpha x, and I'm going to say x squared. I'm going to say minus 2x, so let's make it quite awkward. Oh, not that one. So alpha x, and then plus 4. Alright, so there's my equation, and it's a quadratic, and I want to plot it. Alright, so when I press the equals button here, it says g of x. I don't want that one, alright, because that's going to give me another one. I'm not interested, just want the one. And I press the equals again to move on, and it's going to give me the start values. You know, this is your table values. Well, normally when you're plotting, it kind of gives you a bunch of numbers. So it might give you, plot it between -4 and 4. Right, so -4 and 4. And the step, this bit at the bottom here, is basically all the numbers in between. So if I want to do -4, -3, -2, -1, then I want increments of 1. So that's going to be perfect. If I want to go up in 2, so -4, -2, 0, 2, 4, then I'll change that to a 2. I will do both so you can see, but I'm going to leave it like that and then press equals, and equals again, and you can see I've got -4, -3, and these are the values of the table, which I would literally then just fill into the box. Alright, and there from there, now these are my coordinates. I've got my x coordinate and I've got my y coordinate, and that should give me that lovely parabola that you kind of see. And that's it, it does it all for you. Basically you put the numbers in and it churns it all out for you. Okay, so let's move on, see what else we've got. The fraction button, so this one over here, this is certainly what you will need when you're doing the quadratic formula. Alright, so I am going to put the quadratic formula into the calculator so you can see how I go about doing it, because when you're doing that, it's certainly very, very useful. Why has it gone off? To make sure you use the fraction button correctly. So I'm going to put the quadratic formula into here. Alright, so it's going to be minus something, that's minus b, isn't it? Plus sure. Or minus, can't put both of those in, so I'm going to start with plus. And then, so minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's going to be 5 squared, minus, and here I'm going to put a bracket, 4 times a might be, let's call it 2, 2x squared, and then c number at the end, and this number at the end might be -5. Alright, and the reason I put that in a bracket is because that's 4ac. Alright, all over, and if I scroll down, 2 times, well, my a was 2, I said. Alright, so that would be the quadratic formula, with b as being 5, a as being 2, and c as being -5. Right, quadratic formula. Alright, so that's me kind of putting it all in. Alright, once I've done that, obviously I press equals, and that's going to give me a solution. Alright, so I'd write that down, or I could also press SD if I wanted it that way around. So that's going to give me one solution. Alright, I'm going to go, and this is quite key about the using of these arrow buttons, because if I press left now, it's going to take me back. Alright, because remember I had 2 solutions to this, and I just used the plus. So if I then delete and take away, that should then give me the other solution. Alright, and that's going to give me the other solution. So I've got my 2 solutions just by using the fraction button, putting it all in very, very carefully, and I've got that. Okay, so that if you kind of remember that, hopefully you can remember that. So 5, 2 and -5. Alright, that's quite important. Alright, because I'm going to basically show you those same numbers again. But let's just say you're in an exam, can't remember the formula, it's kind of gone, calculator's going to do it for you. Alright, you're going to lose marks, I'm afraid, if you don't write it all down. However, you're going to get the answer. So when we go to menu, and I scroll down, you'll see equation and functions. All right, so equation and function is the one we're going to go for. All right, so I'm going to press equals, and it's going to give me a simultaneous equation, and again, I'll come to that shortly. Well, yes, you can solve simultaneous equations with this calculator. It's the polynomial we're looking at. All right, polynomial is basically a linear graph or a quadratic or a cubic or even more. But if I go for a polynomial, it asks me for how many degrees. Right, well, this is basically your power of your highest x. So in our case, it's x squared for a quadratic, so it's going to be 2. And then you'll see this, ax squared plus bx plus c, and again, hopefully you are familiar with that, because when you're solving a quadratic, it has to be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, it has to be in a format, and then of course I put the number is. Now if you remember the ones I had before, I had 2 for a, I had 5 for b, and I had, I think it was minus 5 for c. Alright, I think it was minus 5 for c. Yes? Hopefully that's right. Okay, we'll see in a second. Right, so press equals. Alright, so when I press equals, that's not your solution, that's just confirming that one. And I'm going to press equals again. And here we go. Your first value is minus 5 plus root 6 over that. So let's press this SD button. That looks very familiar to the last one. And then if I press equals again, it gives me the other one. It has solved my quadratic for me without using the formula. Alright, it's just kind of put the numbers in and it's going to solve it for me. Alright, so very, very, very useful indeed. Very useful indeed. Alright, so again, the class with calculator has solved you a quadratic. Alright, if I press equals again, alright, and again, it's just another thing. If you are asked for the turning point or the minimum, so try and picture a quadratic graph and the fact it dips at the bottom, it will tell you where it dips. So this is basically at when x is minus 5 over 4 is when it basically hits the bottom. Alright, so when the x value is going to be minus 5 when it hits the bottom. Guess what it's going to tell you next is what that y value is. Alright, so that those two values you've just seen are going to give you your minimum coordinate. Alright, so how far on your x-axis it goes and how far down it goes. So that is my minimum value of that graph that I've just had. And I'm going to look at solving so let's click on the equals and then put simultaneous equation. So number of unknowns, well, it's going to be, certainly with GCSE, it's just going to be 2, where you've got x and y's. And then you'll see you've got something plus something else. Here, so x plus so many y, so let's just put some numbers. So 2x plus 5y equals 20 as 1, alright? And then you'll need, let's try another one, so let's call it like a negative 4x, what would you want, minus 2y equals 24. Looks pretty horrible, doesn't it? So you've got two linear equations, you just put the numbers in, and again you need to make sure you've got those, but again it might be a case of GCSE that it might just give you 2. It might be in Word format, don't really know. But what I would urge you to do is look at the processes required for solving linear simultaneous equation. There are substitution, elimination, and again, you know, the kind of links should be popping down the top right hand corner for you to do that. But when I press equals, it's going to be at minus 10 when they cross, and 8, and it's solved them for me. Right, you may have come across, and hopefully you will have done by the time you do GCSE, something called prime factorisation. It's the idea of taking a number and then splitting it up into a product or multiple of a bunch of prime numbers. All right, and every number will have a product of prime numbers that make it. All right, so your calculator will do this now. So I'm trying to remember which way to do it. So if I press 80 and then press shift fact, will it do it that way or is it the other way around? So shift fact, oh there you go. All right, so I have to do it that way around, so I'll just repeat that one around. So you press 80 and then equals, and then press shift fact, and it's telling me that it's 2 to the power 4 times 5, so 16 times 5. So that is giving me my product of prime factors straight away. All right, very, very nice. So again, it's just doing another job for me to make your life an awful lot easier. Your calculator will use BIDMAS. All right, actually it's worth talking to you about minus 5 squared, or minus 4 squared in this case. Right, because your calculator does do BIDMAS, the I, indices, becomes before the takeaway. So what this is going to do, this is going to tell you this is minus 16. Alright, and I know that because it's basically going to do 4 squared and then put negative. Alright, it's going to tell you it's minus 16. Now, if you wanted to do minus 4 times minus 4, so minus 4 in a bracket squared, then the bracket will need to be there. So if I wrote this minus 4 squared, that's going to give me 16. So be careful with using a calculator, any calculators that matter, if you're squaring a negative number. Because if you don't put a negative in a bracket, then it's going to go wrong. And that'll be the same for using any formula, anything you can put in here. So the other one I want to talk about is iteration. All right, so Q link at the top. If you're doing something involving an iteration, you're going to repeat something over and over and over and over again. So this button here, this ANS button here, is going to be very, very useful. So let's assume you've got an iterative equation that looks something like 2 plus 1 over x, right, where your x is your first value. So let's say your first value is 3. Right, so 2 plus 1 over 3 is your first one, and you're going to press equals. Alright, so that gives you your first answer. So let's say that's x1, then this is going to be x2. So when you do your next one, you're going to put this 7 over 3 where that one was. Well, your calculator, if I go back and delete the 3 and put the answer that you've got, then when I press equals, that is x3. If I press equal again, x4, x5, x6, x7, x8, x9, and so on and so on and so on. And then I'm going to keep pressing it. And at some point, it will probably stop. All right, and that would be my solution to that iterative equation. So we're putting an answer in there. All right, so that's what that does. It puts your previous answer in that you've got. So same thing as before. If I was doing something with a calculator which involved a circle, so I might say 87 times pi is going to give me an answer, and I might say I'm going to use that again. So if I say 24 times that answer, it then gives me 2088 pi. So it's using the answer from before. So that's a really useful button, and certainly for an iterative equation. So that's one that is worth knowing. All right. There is a couple of other functions which are useful. The idea of putting numbers into an equation and finding the mean. So I'll show you that one particular one. So there's this one which is a spreadsheet essentially. So if you've done Excel before, you might be familiar with using a spreadsheet. But if I've just put some numbers in here, so if I put 8, 9 and 10 in here, well that's not 10, 10. And I said, well I want to work out the mean of that. Well you might be able to do it very, very quickly. But essentially it's they add the 3 together and then divide by 3. All right. But if you had lots of them, and you wanted to do it kind of fairly efficiently, and you don't want to make a mistake, then the calculator will do that for you. All right. So if I pressed the options button and I scroll down to mean, you see mean there. All right. So I could do the sum of them and add them up, but I just want the mean. So it's going to give me the mean, and then I want the mean of this lot. So I'm going to do, this is where the cells kind of come in. So A1, and then I want to put the little 2 dots at the top, 2, and again this is very similar to how a spreadsheet works, to A3 and close a bracket, right, and then in this cell here it should then give me my mean, all right, which of course is 9. All right, so it's literally like using an Excel spreadsheet. All right, so you've got a calculator which now does basically Excel stuff for you. Inequalities. All right, so it's a little bit like solving an equation, but with inequalities. And this works really well if you're not very good in terms of the shape of the graph and trying to identify it. So, same as before, 2 is a quadratic. So I'm going to put this, and then you'll see the variety of different ones. Now, depending on what you've got, is it bigger than 0? Is it less than 0? So you've got to choose. All right. So let's just say that I want it when it's underneath 0. So I'm going to pick 2. Right, I'm going to do the same values that I did not that long ago. I'm going to use 2, I'm going to use 5, and then I'm going to put -5 in there. So we know where it crosses already because we've had those. But what I'm after now is the inequality when it is less than 0. Now what it should be with this one, it should be in between the two values that I had. Alright, but of course, in terms of how I write that in my exam, well, you write it like that. Alright, and press the SD button, it'll change the numbers to those. But I write it exactly like this. My x is in between these two, and I put the inequality. It's exactly as you see it here. So again, your calculator is going to do half the job for you. Well, the majority of the job for you is basically going to solve your quadratic. It's going to give you the two values where it crosses the axis, the two roots, and it's going to tell you when your value is in between. All right. If I wanted to do the same one, but I wanted it to be when it's bigger than 0, so I'm going to do it. You'll see the same numbers are in here, but when I put my answer in, you'll notice it's written differently. So when x is less than this, so anything left of this, and then with this one, it's anything. Oh, is it going to move across? There you go. Anything bigger than that one. So you've got two very separate inequalities, and again, what I write down on a piece of paper is easy because I just copy it down here. I just copy exactly what I kind of see on the calculator, so it's going to do my inequality for me. All right. So there's a variety of different functions here. There's a variety of different things that are going to kind of support you. And like I said, I haven't gone through sine, cos, and tan. For those that do an A-level, there's a differentiation, there's an integration. There's certainly like scientific functions in terms of powers and logs. All those kind of different elements that is going to just make this a worthy investment. Anyway, well, thanks very much for kind of listening. I hope you found that useful. Please do like and subscribe. I say I'm going to try and put more kind of content onto the YouTube channel to support you in your learning. But if you haven't invested in this calculator and you think from looking at this you might benefit from it, I'm sure you will. If you haven't got it, then like I said, there's a link down at the bottom for you to go on and buy it. Again, it's relatively cheap and it's certainly worth an investment. All right, well, thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.